Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Shadow Work 101 class. We do have a 102 class, so if you have already done the assessment for the 102 class and have not heard back and did not intend to be in 101, please just send me a message. We'll see if we can get that worked out. But this is for our 101 class. This is week one, so we're going to discuss just a little bit of an introduction and what is the shadow self. So first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Carla, and you can call me Professor Carla, Carla, any of those. It's fine. It doesn't matter. And I have been in the academy just about since it started, maybe give or take a week. This is my second semester teaching. I am an admin here in the academy. I'm also the head of the Dryad House and a few other things. I'm sure you've seen me around. You've probably seen me in chats. You might have had my classes before. So all of my classes sort of function the same way. I like to give you an introduction to myself and our syllabus and everything in the beginning. So just a little bit more about me. I'm a wife and a mother. I've got a toddler who you have probably already heard in this recording. I tried to go back and edit out any moments that get kind of loud, but sometimes I can't get everything. So if you hear some noise, everything's fine here. She's just 3. So if you're a parent, then you definitely know what I'm referring to. But I also have 2 dogs, and they as well tend to be fairly loud. So there also might be some noise coming from there. And I will probably mention this at the beginning of every single class, just so that everyone is aware and not worried about what's going on in the background at my house. So, but just a little bit noisy here. So I do what I can to try to keep it quiet. Typically, I try to excuse myself into a room that's a little more quiet at my house, but lately that has been a lot more difficult than it should be. So that hasn't been happening very much. But I am a green kitchen eclectic witch. You also would probably consider me to be a hereditary witch. My great grandmother was a green witch. My great great aunt was a hedge witch. So it is in my hereditary line. But aside from that, in my normal life, I'm also a business owner. I'm an artist. I stay pretty busy pretty much around the clock. So let's go ahead and talk about our syllabus. Okay, so in this course, you will get an introduction into shadow work, what it is, why we do it, how we do it, and we'll also be going over weekly prompts to get your shadow journey started. Also, later in the semester, about the last 2 weeks, I believe, we're going to start diving a little bit deeper. We won't have formal class. We'll just be doing a lot more shadow prompts. That'll make more sense as we come up on it. So I would suggest for this class that you might have 2 separate notebooks. And you, by all means, do not have to do that. But I might keep one for just note-taking for informational purposes. And then I strongly suggest starting a book of shadows, so to speak, where you're going to put your shadow entries into it. This will probably be something that you're going to want to hang on to. Now, some people do use note-taking apps. I think there's even a few people that have just made up a Discord server that's just private and that's all they put on there. So, there's a lot of different ways to do it. Do it in a way that works for you. Because this is only going to be for you. You can share your entries with us if you'd like to, but you by all means don't have to. So this is primarily for you. So let me tell you what you can expect moving forward in this class. On Tuesdays, I'll post a link to our video class, and I do all of my videos just like this one. I put everything on YouTube. Actually, if you're following me on YouTube, you're probably going to be able to see all of the videos well before I actually publish them on the server. And that is just because I'm having all of my lessons ready in advance. And I like to do them on YouTube because you can always go back and reference them. You can pause them, replay them, whatever works for you. I've just found that that's the easiest way to do it, just kind of based on how past classes have gone. At the end of the class, I'll give you a few homework questions. And those are just for you to answer in our homework channel. There's no right or wrong answers. They're really just to get you kind of engaged with the lesson. Then on Fridays, I will post a weekly shadow prompt for you And again, you can either share this with the class or keep it private. It's completely up to you. I do suggest you do it because, as you're going to find out, shadow work is incredibly important. It's almost one of the beginning things that you should be doing in your journey as a witch, but it's very, very important. So I do suggest that you at least do it, but you don't have to share it. These questions are going to get personal, and there may be things that you don't want to share with the class. Now, if you do want to share them, you are more than welcome to privately send them to me, either on Discord or through my email address that's listed here to the left in our syllabus. You can definitely do that if you would just like to share them. So the only exception to the weekly shadow prompts, as I said, will be the last 2 weeks where we'll be doing multiple prompts, like all throughout the week. We won't be doing deeper classes. So there will be a final assignment for this class, and it's basically going to be a discussion about how you have felt about the discovery of your shadow self and what you have learned during this semester. And it's going to be a difficult journey. So please just be prepared for that. I will probably mention this disclaimer at the beginning of our next class, just to make sure that everyone is aware of it again, so that there's no confusion. But it is a hard journey. Shadow work is very, very difficult psychologically to do. So just be aware of that. Okay, let's jump into our schedule. So this first week, we're talking today about, I did give the introduction, and then we're going to be talking about the shadow self or the subconscious self. And week 2, we'll be talking about what shadow work actually is. Week 3, why do we do shadow work? Week 4, how do we do shadow work? There's a lot of different methods. Also, just a note, during week 4, I will be out on vacation, so I will not be available that week. But I believe that Mystic V, is going to be posting my lessons for me that week. So if you have questions, please feel free to put them in our class chat, and someone will answer them for you. But I'll discuss that again during our week 4 lesson. Okay, week 5, we're going to talk about the benefits of shadow work, what you have to gain. And week 6 is going to be a really important one. And that's going to be talking about self-care during shadow work, because you're going to need it. Then week 7 and 8, we'll be doing a full week of exploration into your shadow. There'll be a full week of prompts. We won't have formal classes. Every day, Monday through Friday, I'll give you a different prompt. Just be prepared. It's going to be a difficult few weeks. Now, with that being said, if you're finding that it's a hard journey for you and you're struggling, you need to stop at any point and give yourself a break. You do not have to do them at the speed with which I release them. You can if you're able to, but please take care of yourself, and we'll discuss that more as we get closer to it. So the last week of class, we won't have any formal classes, and your final written assignment will be due that week. And that's just going to go into our homework channel. Okay, so just to talk about the disclaimers, I've kind of mentioned them a little bit already. And like I said before, I'll mention them again next week. Shadow work is hard. This class, we will be doing basic shadow work, meaning that we will be talking about... I'm going to say lighter subjects only because in Shadow Work 102, it's going to be very, very deep and very hard to get through. But for this class, it's still going to be difficult. I don't want to throw everything at you at one time because I want you first to understand really what we're trying to do. So in the beginning, your first couple of prompts are going to be very, very light. I just want you to start to acknowledge that shadow self exists, and start to kind of pinpoint a few things about it. Now, once we get to the last 2 weeks of doing the full exploration, these prompts might bring up memories that you may have suppressed or that you may not want to revisit. And I just want to be very clear. If this gets to be too much for you, stop. You are not obligated in any way to finish this class. I definitely encourage you as a witch, or even if you're not, even if you're just taking this class for self-exploration, I do encourage you to try to get through it, but do it on your own time if you need to. Because some of these questions are going to be hard to answer. There might be days where you find yourself crying about the responses or the memories that it brings up. You might start to feel angry. This is going to happen. And I just want you all to be prepared. It's not going to be easy. And it's not easy for any of us. The longer you've been a witch does not affect how easy or difficult shadow work is. This is a look into the pieces of you that you are hiding and not wanting to acknowledge subconsciously. So uncovering that will not always be pleasant. So please just be aware. I'm telling you now, it may not be easy. It will be worth it in the long run, but do not push yourself past your point of comfort. It's not that worth it. You don't need to be miserable in these responses. Answer what's comfortable for you in a rate which is comfortable for you. Don't overwhelm yourself. If you are starting to struggle in a way that you feel like you need to speak to someone, I am always available for you. I do have office hours, but if you send me a message, I will typically be able to get back to you fairly quickly. That being said, I may not always be able to help you. If you find that you're not sure if you're psychologically ready to take this journey, or if it's getting you to a point where you are in any kind of danger within yourself, I strongly encourage you to stop exactly what you're doing. I strongly encourage you to stop what you're doing. Do not proceed with this class. And if you need to seek professional help, you need to do that. There is nothing that is worth your health or sanity, okay? This is going to be a great journey and worth it in the end, but don't sacrifice yourself to get there. I hope I'm making myself clear without sounding too pushy. I don't want anyone in danger of hurting themselves or someone else because of this class. And I hope that you all do take me at my word that if you need to quit, no one is going to think less of you. No one. I can tell you personally that this is a journey I have started and stopped many times because of that exact reason. It gets to be too much and you just can't take anymore. So when and if that happens, it's okay to stop and come back to it later. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I wanted to give you this quote to jump off with. Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. Carl Jung. And that's important because the shadow self is actually a term that was coined by Carl Jung. He's a psychiatrist. He was a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst. And the shadow self is the side of you that is unknown, sometimes not only to yourself, but to other people as well. It is everything that's in your subconscious. And contrary to what Freud posited, Carl Jung actually suggests that the subconscious is full not only of negative aspects of ourself that have been suppressed, but also of positive things that have been suppressed. However, it is largely negative. These aspects tend to be what have been rejected about our personality. The positive aspects that have been suppressed are more frequently found in people who have lower self-esteem or anxiety, and we're going to get to that. Some aspects, however, are something that most people in general tend to suppress because they're more closely related to our primitive animal instincts. And think about how animals behave in nature. Things that we would say that humans would never do to each other, that type of thing. Those things may still exist in our psyche, but we just suppress them because they're too closely related to those animal instincts and not socially acceptable, quote unquote. And according to Jung, these aspects tend to be irrational and often instinctive, whether they are negative or positive, okay? And one thing about the shadow self is once it is suppressed, without knowing that you're doing it, you'll have a tendency to psychologically project those aspects of yourself onto other people. Meaning that if, this is a loose example, but if you are subconsciously a selfish person, but you don't outwardly express that, you might have a tendency to accuse other people of being selfish. Does that make sense? This projection, doing this to other people, obviously, definitely leads to some negative effects in relationships. But one problem with this shadow self is that it's constantly blurring the line between our ego and the real world, because we are not acknowledging that we do have these negative pieces of ourselves. We begin to think of ourselves as wholly good because of all the things we are projecting outwardly, and completely forgetting the negative aspects. And sometimes, like I said, the positive things. But because of that, it makes us view other people in a way that is unrealistic. You start to hold people to standards they are incapable of rising to because of this blurred line. You see yourself as wholly good, and you're projecting those negative things onto other people, but also failing to acknowledge that the negative things in them are also present in you. Now, let's talk about how the shadow self actually comes into existence, because this is exactly how we are going to tackle it. We're going to confront it head on and deal with it. Primarily, your shadow self begins to develop in your childhood. However, it is constantly developing. There will be things throughout your entire life which will happen to you that will be pushed down into your subconscious self. A lot of times, trauma causes these negative and sometimes positive aspects of ourself that we want to hide. In this class, I'm going to give you some life examples from my own life. Not for pity, but for examples, because I can give them directly and it will make sense. So, for example, in my life, my natural father was an alcoholic. And that caused a lot of trauma for me, not only as a child, but even as I was developing into a young adult. So, anything that he did that I saw as negative or difficult to deal with, especially if I saw it in my own personality, I pushed it down so as not to deal with it. But as a result, if I ever see someone displaying any sort of aspects the way he did, I tend to look at them in a certain light and remember him. And the trauma is what is causing that. So, other than trauma, societal norms also contribute to what becomes your shadow self. For example, how many people can say that at some point in their life, they thought something like, oh my gosh, I wish that, the bottom third of intelligence in people would just be eradicated. Something along those lines. Of course, that sounds bad. You're making faces, I can guarantee it, because that sounds horrible. But I guarantee you that at some point in your life, it has occurred to you that if you could just eliminate the people that lack a little bit of intelligence, maybe things would be easier. This is not true. Let's be clear. It's not true that would be the case. But we have dark thoughts. That dark thought might have occurred to you at some point, or something different, or worse. And you're human. Those thoughts are going to happen. You're not going to be able to help it. But you're going to suppress that. No one is going to speak about that because society would really frown on that. We aren't supposed to have those types of opinions. So it's things like that. You're not going to show that to other people because that's not normal in our society. It's also not correct. Please don't take that to mean anything significant. But also, I want to talk about just the generalized suppression that you might have encountered growing up as a child. How many people can say that at some point in their life, they had a close relative, a parent, grandparent, aunt, uncle, anybody, who told them something like, "You're being too emotional," or "We don't get angry about that. We don't cry about that." Some kind of comment about a behavior of yours that taught you that this specific behavior makes you less appealing, unlovable, that people don't look at you in a positive light if you portray those aspects of yourself. I guarantee you every single person has dealt with that. I know I have. I definitely have. My father actually has always told me and teased me about being emotional. So as I got into my teenage years and even into my adult years, I just stopped being that way. And I'm finding myself again within the past few years, so I'm starting to get that back, and that's okay. But I lost it for a long time because he teased me about it and made me feel like I was wrong for having emotions. And when I say emotions, I mean that things would hurt my feelings easily, or things would make me sad easily. And I think that a lot of parents don't do this intentionally to their children. I'm sure that some do, but a lot of parents don't do this intentionally, but it does happen. And sometimes we don't even realize that it's happened. You may not realize that your parent saying that to you is what made you stop behaving that way. But the thing is that some things that you have suppressed, it's okay to be that way. It's okay to feel things heavily. There's nothing wrong with getting emotional in emotional situations. That's okay. The truth is that no one should ever have made you feel that way. But it does happen. And sometimes it's not meant that way. I know that, even with my own daughter, there have been times where, I'm trying to get something done. For example, maybe I'm recording a class and she is just running and she's having a good time and she's yelling, but we're in the house. And I want to tell her, hey, stop yelling. We don't do that at all. That's way too loud. Like, I want to stop her, but I can't because she's just having fun and she's just a kid and this is what kids do. And what I don't want her to do is lose that appetite for just being silly and having fun. So I brought that up in particular because I want to show you all a video coming up here right after this next slide, okay? And it's going to connect back to what I just said about my daughter, for example. So let's talk about how the shadow self affects the outward presentation of a person. First of all, you will never be true to who you are if you don't dig your shadow self out. Granted, there are some pieces that you can acknowledge within yourself without discussing with other people. Obviously, your job is not to pull out every negative thought you've ever had and lay it on the table for the world to see. That's not what this is about. We do not hurt others so that we can heal ourselves. But you do need to discover these things, and discovering them for yourself is going to be enough. Now, you are welcome to share them with us, with your class, but if you uncover something that's a negative feeling you have towards someone, if you need to get that off your chest, obviously you should, but don't use that as an excuse to hurt someone. Honestly, physically or emotionally. That's not what this is about. This is about you. But also, suppressing parts of yourself. According to different psychological studies, this can often lead to anxiety, depression, OCD. It could even cause someone to be considered bipolar and a slew of other conditions. For example, I have incredibly bad social anxiety, and I don't like being in crowded places. It makes me incredibly uncomfortable. But as a result, I still have to do it. I have to just ignore that about myself and kind of suppress it. But for years, I was ignoring the fact that that was how I felt. So what was happening was I was going to the grocery store, and in the middle of the grocery store being so and completely overwhelmed with an invisible weight on my chest that I had to leave. And I just kept doing this to myself over and over and over again. And I kept experiencing this. And the truth is that I was absolutely miserable because what I wasn't saying to myself is, hey, this makes you uncomfortable. If the store is crowded, we're going to come back when it's not so that we don't experience this. I wasn't allowing myself to feel that. And it's okay to feel that way. It's okay. Now, sometimes this isn't the only thing that causes anxiety. Let me just be clear. There are a lot of other conditions that cause anxiety. But when you put yourself into a situation because you feel like you aren't allowed to have feelings about it, and as a result, you suffer psychologically or physically in some way, you are suppressing yourself. And what we're going to learn, what we're going to focus on, is not doing that to ourselves anymore. The feelings that you have, the opinions you have, everything that you feel towards just about anything is valid for you, and it doesn't have to be important for other people for it to be important for you. So in that example, I should never have worried about what other people were going to think if I told them that I was uncomfortable going into a store that was overcrowded, because it doesn't affect them. It affects me. And the fact that I can say that is what caused me to have those spells of just feeling like I was suffocating and that I could not take another step and that I was going to fall apart at any given moment. I needed to acknowledge that so that, first of all, I don't put myself in that situation. It's something that makes me uncomfortable, and it's okay that it makes me uncomfortable. It's absolutely okay. A lot of people are like that. So we're going to discover this. We're going to discover these things about you, hopefully. And some of them, I hope that you can say, hey, this is a problem I'm having and this is why. And the fact is, it's okay that I have that problem. So I'm just not going to put myself through that. I know I don't like this, so I'm not going to do it. End of story. But just keep in mind that not every anxiety disorder, not every case of depression, OCD, bipolar, not all of that will relate back to just uncovering your shadow self. But sometimes it will. I am not trying to say that this is going to heal you 100%, but I'll tell you what, it's going to help. It is going to help. And we'll talk more about this on week 3. Okay, so I'm going to show you a video here. This video is about the effect that emotional deprivation and neglect has on babies. Now, this is not going to be a graphic video by any means, not at all. But it is kind of sad to watch. But what I want you to see is how trauma affects the outward presentation of a person, but also how trauma affects psychological disorders that you may develop. And the reason I'm choosing this video, particularly about babies, is to show you that even this early on in life, without any sort of coaching, no comprehension whatsoever of what shadow self is, of what the psyche is, of how different events affects you, these children are already exhibiting these symptoms. So just take this and try to imagine what abuse and neglect would do to a grown adult, especially someone who has experienced this maybe for years, maybe a child that's experienced this for years, what effect that might have on them. And what I'm hoping you'll see is that there is clearly clearly a negative effect that this trauma has on these children. But also, I want you to understand that these things, trauma, suppression, all of these things may cause you to outwardly present this way or in a similar way. And we want to try to heal that. We want to confront that trauma. We want to dig up what's been suppressed, and we want to start looking at who we really are. But I just want you to see how these babies have been affected by what's happened in their life. And I mentioned that this was going to kind of relate back to my daughter because of all the psychological studies done over children. That's something I worry about all the time. I don't want to rob her of being a kid. And as an adult, we can say like, oh, I wasn't trying to do that. That wasn't my intention. I didn't mean to make her feel bad. But it's something that I'm hoping that you'll see and be really aware of. And hopefully it'll make sense for you, not only for yourself, but moving forward with your family or, your siblings, your children, your grandchildren, whatever it is, just to see how different types of trauma can affect a person, even as young as these children. It's in French, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to translate it for you. There are subtitles to the video, but because of the way I have to present it, you're not going to be able to see them. So I'm just going to translate it for you. But this study was done back in 1965. So it is a little bit dated, but the effects are absolutely the same. Okay? All right, let's go ahead and get that started. Children raised under favorable family conditions. Emmanuel, raised by his family, is an active explorer and eager to grab any new object he sees. He moves it from hand to hand and brings it up to his mouth, for example. He is completely absorbed by the activity and pays little attention to those around him. Christine, who regularly attends a nursery, does not behave much differently from the other children. She handles the block with both hands. Tries to stack them and picks them up when they fall. She, too, is totally absorbed by the game. These two examples show us children whose families offered them complete security. On the other hand, when family conditions are unfavorable to the point of requiring a children's removal from the home, the child's behavior will be affected as follows. Institutionalized children. Caroline, a victim of maternal neglect, is underweight. She picks up one of the blocks but shows only fleeting interest in playing. She frequently looks at the experimenters in the room. She engages in some play, but is preoccupied by those around her. In the next cases, we also see increased attention paid by the child to his environment and a correlating decrease in attention paid to the game. For example, Veronica, who is also underweight, expresses refusal by raising her hands in an avoidance gesture. When she finally picks up a block, the worried looks she casts suggest anxiety. Her demeanor is passive. She does not play. Jean, who was removed from her home at a young age and institutionalized after several failed foster placements, carefully watches the movements of the psychologist. An emotionally deprived child may prioritize social contact, which could be motivated by the child's intense desire to find a maternal substitute. Her curiosity in new objects is minimal. She accepts without resistance when the block is placed in her hand, but shows no real interest. Renee, whose case is similar, sits motionless in front of the blocks. After a while, he makes a motion for the block, but is plagued by such anxiety that little by little he becomes totally disinterested in the game and those around him. He withdraws into himself and takes refuge in the self-soothing activity of thumb-sucking. Annette, who is also underweight, has an attitude of immobility. She is completely disinterested in her surroundings. Her growing anxiety manifests by twitching lip movements and irregular breathing. Autism can be discerned from the vague gaze of this little girl. Here we see Colette, also deprived of affection and care, showing the same symptoms of autism and anxiety. She remains still and breathes heavily. Thus, emotional deprivation provokes not only the anxiety that is well known to psychologists, but also inhibits the child's exploratory instincts and curiosity in new objects, and may result in autism in the most serious cases. Okay, so I hope you noted that as they progress through the severity of what the children have been through, their outward symptoms were significantly more severe. Children started displaying symptoms of anxiety that we as adults would display. So this just shows you that the effect that different traumas and abuse can have on even an infant. Just imagine what even further years of this type of treatment would have caused these children to experience, even so far as becoming adults. It is very difficult. Okay, let's talk about our homework questions. And as I said, I'll give you homework questions at the end of every class. And these will be due by the end of the week. And I really just want you to answer these. There's no right or wrong answers. It's totally your perception of things. No judgment on responses to this at all. Whatever you think. It's just to get you engaged with our lesson. Okay. When thinking about what might be a part of your own shadow, do you feel that there are more negative aspects or more positive aspects of yourself hidden there? And that's going to be difficult to answer. Just give it your best shot. But just thinking about what's occurred with you in your life, the things that you've been through, do you think you're holding on to more negative things or more positive things? Do you feel that your shadow is presenting itself in any outward ways? And if so, what makes you feel that way? And the last question, how did you react to the video that I showed at the end of class? I know that was not easy to watch, especially if you're a parent. That's really hard, although I don't think it'd be easy for anyone to watch. But how did it make you feel? Reflecting on what we've discussed with this class, what are your reactions to that? Okay, well, that's all I have for you all today. I hope that this was informative, and next week we'll dig in a little bit deeper. So I hope you all have a great week, and I'll see you next week. Bye.